Hi chefs, and welcome to our charcuterie practical. Now, we've spoken a lot about charcuterie in the last couple of weeks, building up to this very same practical, and we want to share with you many things. We are going to do 9 different elements in this demonstration, and we want to show you how we can take one thing and process it into something else that would last much longer. We also spoke about head to tail cooking last year in our meat and poultry theoretical lesson, and then today is the start of that head to tail cooking. So what I want to show you is Larry number 8, if I'm not mistaken, and this, ta-da, is what he is. This is the natural aspect that we got from Larry, and I'm going to show you what we're going to use it for. Now, please note that this is not clarified yet, so it's quite cloudy, but what you'll see, and we set it in this vase so that you can see, is that the grit that might have been there, we did strain it once we boiled them up. It would settle at the bottom. Then you have your aspic, and then there is a fat layer on top that is quite thick and spreadable. You don't want to use this because this is going to, it does have a little bit of grit as well. So all I'm going to do with our friend here is just remove the fat layer, and it's easier to remove the fat layer once your aspic is cooled down because it's solid. Just scooping it out like we would when we skim stocks is going to waste quite a lot of your jelly. So if you wanted to now make your natural aspic jelly that you could use for other things, this would still need to go through a clarification process. So what we do is this jelly, and I just want to show you. Oh, it makes me so happy, look at that. This jelly is then going to go into a pot cold. You kind of mush it up, and then you add your clarification, your egg whites and your mirepoix, for instance, and you bring it up to a slow simmer and let it clarify, and then it becomes really clear. We didn't add any flavorants to our aspic because we want it to be quite clean. We will be using this to finish off 2 of our elements in our practical today. So we're going to use this when we finish off our pot pies later, and right now we are going to set the rest of what was our original Larry. So I'm just going to put our aspic aside and tell you what's going on here. So I have my beef tongue. This is going to be a mixed terrine with pork and beef, but I just wanted to show you it's still nice and warm, so I wanted to make sure that you can see. This beef tongue has now cooked for 4 to 6 hours. I can't remember. It was on the whole day before we started. So it's really nice and tender. Although it's still a muscle, if I were to put my finger through it, you can see it is really tender. Now, the tongue, if you remember in the lesson, has a membrane that I told you to take off. So I took this off a little bit earlier just because I didn't want it to cool down. But this is how thick that membrane is. And if you were to look very closely, you can actually see the rough edges that I said you might pick up with regards to, like when the cow licks up the feed. So you just want to make sure, imagine having to eat this, it's like leather. So you want to make sure that when you do cook tongue and serve it, that you remove the membrane. So I'm just going to, because we're going to make a prawn terrine, where we are going to use our tongue as a texture element, I'm just going to cut the tongue at a little angle here because I want it nice and flat. And then this big piece, it's got a lot of, it kind of has a little bit of grit there that I cleaned out already. So I'm just going to trim this up because I have a terrine mold ready that is quite long. So I want to make sure that every person or every piece of my terrine has at least a slice of tongue. This ugly bit, what you could do is then chop it up, and it would then give you a little bit of texture when it comes to your terrine itself. So you could just give it a rough dice and add that to your picked meat. So Larry went into the pot and it cooked for 8 hours at a low and slow heat. And what we did is just cold water and I put a little bit of peppercorn in there because the smell is not the best, so the peppercorns does help. You can put mirepoix like celery and onion in there, but like I say, it then kind of overpowers your flavors. And what we then did is we picked the meat while it was still warm so that we can flake it off. Just like, you know, the in thing these days is pulled meat. So I've diced up the tongue, and what I have going on over here is my curry mixture. Now, a traditional brawn made of our picked meat has a mild curry flavor. So a lot of turmeric, you'll see it's quite yellow, and I sauteed some onions, turmeric, curry powder, a little bit of cumin, a little bit of coriander powder, and salt and pepper. So I have that cooking because I really want the onions to be soft and translucent and succulent. So it's a low heat, you'll see it just kind of slow bursts of heat. And then I'm just going to move myself around. What we have here is the remainder of our friend Larry. So we've picked the cheek meat, the meat under the ears. There's quite a lot of chunky little bits here. And what we've done is just made sure that there is no bone. Yes, there could be bone from the eardrum, for instance, and from the mouth cavity, for instance. So you'll see that it's got a really nice mix of dark and light meats. So this is picked, and I've made sure there are no bones, but it's still quite chunky. And I want to keep it chunky because we really like the texture of this terrine. So all I'm going to do now is add our friend into our curried mixture. And I think that should be enough. And then we are just going to stir our curry mix through. But what is going to help us set our terrine is our aspic. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spoon 2 generous helpings of aspic into this pan and melt it through. So this is not a cooked terrine because obviously it was cooked already. So I'm just going to turn up the heat here, and I'm going to make sure that my aspic and curry mixture goes through the meat, and that is then going to help me set my brawn once it has warmed up. So we've mixed through our brawn mixture, and I feel a bone. There you are. Sorry. Kom now. So we've mixed through our brawn mixture, and it's really nice and warm, and at this stage you want to adjust the seasoning because you can't, once it's been cooked, or once it's been set, sorry, you can't adjust the seasoning then. So all I'm going to do, I know I seasoned everything before I went in, so I'm just going to finish off with a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper and stir that through. So while I stir this through, what I have done is I have prepared my mold. So I'm taking a long terrine mold, or you can use a bread tin for instance, and I've lined it with plastic. I've lined it with a few layers of plastic, and the reason why is just it's easier to then turn it out. So at this stage, I'm going to chuck in my chunky tongue and make sure I stir that through before I start adding this to my tray. So we're going to put this in the fridge to set because the aspic is like gelatine, and that's also why you don't really want to boil the aspic too much once you've heated it up. So once it's in the tray, I am going to then weigh it down in the fridge itself. So I'm just going to move a bit closer to the pan, and I'm going to go down with a layer of my pulled meat. And chefs, you know, if you want to do this at home and the idea of a pig's brain doesn't entice you, then by all means just get like pork shoulder or any type of meat. Make a pulled mixture like this, and then bone, a pulled mixture like this, and then follow the same instructions. And if you don't have aspic, you can just use a little bit of gelatine. So I've kind of put it halfway in, and I'm just making sure that I press down so that there are no air pockets. And then I'm going to add my centerpiece. There we go. Press it down and then fill it up. The reason why it's important that we do this while it's warm is because as it cools down and it weighs down, it's going to help with the setting of the element. It's just going to give you less air pockets. It's going to be nice and tight. Right, so all I'm doing is fitting it all in here, and then we are going to weigh it down. Chef Shanae, while I'm finishing this up, don't you want to bring us the next element of what we are going to do? Right, so my terrine is now in the mold, and what we're going to do is we're going to close it up, and the most important part that you need to remember when you do things like this is a drip tray, because there is liquid in here. There's too much liquid, but we would rather have too much liquid and have it seep out than not enough. So what I'm going to do now, just with my knife, is poke a few holes, and then these are my handles for later. I'm just folding my handles in, and what we're going to do is we are going to create pressure so that it then weighs down as it cools down. And then the reason for the drip tray is you'll see that the excess liquid is going to spill over. So what I have here is a brick. We've just covered it for hygiene purposes, and the brick is now going to weigh this tray down, and this is going to go in the fridge, and it'll probably take about 3 to 4 hours to set before we can turn it out. Chef Shanae, what are you doing?
Hi chefs. So chefs, what I'm going to show you here today is the process of confying. Now, confying is cooking low and slow, so at a low heat in oil or fat as a whole. So chefs, what we have here is we have duck hindquarters. So you can see here, that's the duck that we had processed the other day. So we have our duck hindquarters, and remember we spoke about keeping that liquid gold, which was the duck fat. So what we had done is rendered all our duck fat down to create this beautiful liquid gold of duck fat. So I have my duck fat there, and I just wanted to show you. This one in the pot we have melted down already, but this is what the duck fat looked like. So I'm just going to top that up in our confit. Okay, and then chefs, what I'm going to add is I have a bit of white wine flavor as well. So I'm just going to put a bit of white wine in there. Okay, then I have a bit of thyme, some salt, some pepper. That's just going to add a bit of seasoning as well. Chefs, our intention is to cook this low and slow to a point of where you can just pull the meat off the bone. Okay, so it's going to be nice, it's going to be beautiful, it's going to be tender. Okay, then chefs, what I have is just some duck fat as well in its raw form. And chefs, as this cooks, I can tell you now, it's going to go so nice and crispy. I don't know if you want to eat it, but you're welcome to. But as it cooks low and slow, all that fat is going to render, and then the skin is going to crispen up. So it's just going to become beautiful, which is a word I'm not allowed to say apparently.
I'm just saying she says it a lot. If you want to count it, I'll give you $50 or maybe start a drinking game. That's a good idea.
Okay. And then chefs, lastly, just some oranges. Oranges go well with duck. And also a little bit of acidity as well, so it's going to give it a bit of flavor. So I'm just going to pack my oranges in, over, under, everywhere, and then I'm going to cover this with foil, and then I'm going to put it in my oven for about 3 to 4 hours at 80 degrees.
Yeah, might take a bit longer. It all depends on how the duck feels. Okay, literally it needs to be soft and tender and come off the bone. So while Chef Shanae is getting the confit in the oven, I'm starting with our poultry terrine. So we're having a duck and chicken terrine, and we are going to make a gratin force meat. Remember what that is? That's our rough force meat. And we are going to layer it with pieces of chicken and duck and nuts and fruits. But what I'm busy doing, and I'm going to ask Chef Shanae to continue so that I can continue with the rest, is we are layering our pan, our terrine tray, with bacon, streaky bacon. So this is going to add a beautiful smokiness to our terrine, and it's going to give it a sock, if I can say. It kind of gives it a nice little membrane for presentation purposes. We're not going to cover the sides because the sides will be cut off. Again, I've lined the tin with plastic wrap, like double line it so that it's nice and strong, and make sure that it overflows. And then we're just going to continue. Chef, if you can just pull the whole board across and continue with that. Then what I have here is some chicken mince, and with the chicken mince we are then going to add a few other ingredients. So into my chicken mince, I'm then going to add a few of my flavors. This is going to add not only flavor, but it's also going to give us really beautiful textural elements. Because it's got duck, which is quite gamey, it's got bacon, which is quite smoky, I'm going to add a fruity element, and this is just really, this is large raisins. You could do this with apricots as well. It gives you a beautiful orange, if I can say, play, but I quite like the black flakes that the raisins are going to give. I have some chopped chives and a little bit of zested orange. And then this is my favorite, is pistachios. Make sure that they are shelled properly because they'll break someone's tooth. But the pistachio nut is going to give us a really beautiful green, if I can say, textural element a little bit later. And then to this, I'm just going to add a generous helping of salt and pepper. And I'm going to mix this through, just using my hand, to make sure that it kind of incorporates all the way. Good. Oops. Chef, why don't you just hand me my stray raisin there. Right, chefs, with the terrine, it's very important to get the seasoning right now, because you'll be serving a person a slice, like you get a slice of bread, and you can't exactly adjust the seasoning then. So just make sure that you are okay. Chef, another raisin has escaped the thingy. So there's my farce, nice and chunky and flavorful, and our bacon has been lined, and over here we have duck breast that I have just rendered the fat on the skin and sealed the bottom. It's not cooked at all. Again, the same happened with chicken, and then we have our duck livers and our chicken livers that we've just sauteed off, and I've added a little bit of whiskey. I've flambéed it a bit so that it can build the layers of flavor. So chef, don't you want to move the board a little bit closer? What I have here in my hand is just a little bit of water. It just helps the farce not to stick. And what we're going to do now is we are going to layer our mince mixture into the bottom of our pan, and the farce is going to be the glue that sticks everything together. So once I have a bottom layer, keeping in mind that the bottom of the terrine mold is going to be the top of presentation. So that then goes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my duck, and again the skin side is down because it is presentation side. What you would do is, if you had open spaces, you could fill it with something. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of the liver, and so that every person that gets a slice has a textural element. Then I'm going to top it with another layer of my farce, and you want to make sure that you push all the air pockets out, because you really don't want these air pockets. And this is then, chef, if you could just quickly make sure that the oven is ready for us. We need a bit of space in the oven because we have a drip tray. I have it somewhere behind me. If you can also just get us the drip tray, chef. And then a little bit of water in the drip tray itself. Okay, so second layer done. What am I going to do now? My chicken. And I'm pressing it down. And what I did is I remembered that there was the liver gap was there. So now I'm just filling it a different gap with our actual livers, so that everybody gets either a piece of duck or chicken and or a piece of liver. And you can see the liver is still very pink. And the reason why the duck and the chicken isn't fully cooked is because we don't want it to overcook in the oven. This now goes into a 150-degree oven, or you can play with 160, 150, but a low oven, because we don't want it to color. and it's going to go in a water bath so that it can regulate the heat. And this is going to cook for about an hour, hour and a half, depending on the size of your terrine. And because it cooks at for a long time, we really don't want the duck and the chicken to overcook and go too brown. So what I'm doing now is I'm just kind of pressing out the air, and then we are going to close it up. Make sure that the bacon is everywhere. Sorry, you have to have fun while you do it. And once that is all in, we are now going to just close up our plastic wrap and take our knife. Chef, if you can just grab the knife, I think I put it that side, just to quickly give me a little bit of pokey pokies into my drip tray, my water bath. And then Chef Shanae is going to just poke a few holes, put the lid back on, not the lid, the handles back in, and in the oven for about an hour at 150 to 60 degrees. Chef Shanae, what's your favorite fish?
Salmon.
So what we're going to do today is we're going to make rabbit-lax. Now from your French notes, you know this, pickled or marinated Scandinavian salmon. So this is cured salmon that we're using Norwegian salmon, I believe. Yes. Très expensive, okay, so just treat it with care. And we have our salmon, it's got skin on still, it's been scaled, so that the skin is going to help us retain the moisture in the salmon itself. So it's absolutely beautiful. So what do? We want to cure. What is the main ingredient in curing? We spoke about that in our lesson. Salt. So what we have here is 1 kilogram of salt. And to offset the salt, and to help with the moisture, if I can say creation, we have 1 kilogram of sugar. So sugar and salt go together, and this then gets mixed in. We have some peppercorns and some coriander seeds, and I like to mix it in. So you can do either a dry cure or a wet cure. Now a wet cure is going to cure your item much faster. So if you're in a hurry, you want to make a wet cure. The Scandinavian people, I don't know what they're called, actually use vodka as a liquid. So you could actually add a bit of vodka in, and then it kind of helps the alcohol evaporate, so it doesn't add more moisture. But it does start with that liquid sand type of motion. So what you could do with this is add a little bit of water, just to make a liquid sand, or you can do a dry cure. We're going to do a dry cure. Yes. So with the salt and sugar mix, we are then going to lay the bed for our salmon. And what we have here is just some of our the blue cloth or pink cloth. You can use muslin cloth. Muslin cloth is just really expensive. So we're just kind of making a nice salt bed, and when you work with the salt, you'll find out where you have hidden cuts and bruises in your body. Then it's going to go down skin first on top of that salt bed. Okay, so the skin we're going to cure as well, because it's going to create a little leather pouch for the salmon to live in. And then we are going to generously pack the salt over the salmon and make sure, breathe it in, that it's completely covered. And then I'm going to add my flavorants. So you can then add your dill, for instance. If you wanted to, you could kind of break the dill into your salt mixture before you pack it. And then on top of that, I have some lemon. Don't put the lemon straight on top of the fish, because it is going to burn and blister it. And then on top of that, I'm just going to add a bit more salt. You can other flavors if you want, some fennel seeds. It all depends on you, but traditionally we're just going to do this. Then, Chef Shanae, while I wash my hands, if you could just close it up.
Sure.
Nice and tight. Make sure that the salt is fully wrapped into the salmon. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to flip it over, just so that our tissue, 1, 2, 3. So now you can see it's fully covered. And what's going to happen now is we're going to put a tray on top, and we're going to weigh it down and put it in the fridge. And probably talk to it, I don't know what she's doing. And then this is going going to go in the fridge for about 4 hours with the size of the salmon, but the bigger the salmon, the longer it's going to cure. Don't leave it overnight with fish. It's really, if I can say volatile, you want to check it every now and then. But you could cure beef the same way. We, for instance, in the restaurant, if I had a restaurant, if I had a biltong salad, I would rather do my own cure than do dried biltong because it's going to give you a nice flavor. So in your practicals, you will be curing meat in the same way that we're curing this fish.
So chefs, I'm going to show you how to make a sausage. So chefs, what we have here, we have a bit of lamb mince. We have a curry mixture, so I'm going to make a spicy lamb sausage like me. And then I just have a bit of fresh herbs.
I don't say anything.
And then chefs, what encases our sausage is sausage casing or casings itself. Now, what we have here is we have an intestine from an animal, probably lamb. You can see how thin and small it is. So it's probably a lamb casing. Now, you get synthetic casings these days. So anything made from a plant base. But this is from a animal, and that's the case that we are going to be using today, chefs. So what's going to happen, the first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix my sausage or my sausage mixture. So like I said, I have my lamb here, and to my lamb, I'm going to add my curry paste to it. And Charcuterie made it, so I'm surprised it's not yellow. And then I'm going to add my fresh herbs. Okay, chefs, and I'm just going to use my hand, and I'm just going to give that a very good mix, just to make sure that it is thoroughly incorporated, because you want to make sure that every piece of sausage tastes the same, number one, and has the same flavor.
Did you hear how I said nothing? Chef, do you put salt and pepper?
Yes, chef.
You want?
That's why I have you.
Thank you. So, interesting fact, sausages, we've spoken about that already, is mandated by percentage of how much, you can call it a specific sausage by how much meat it actually contains. So a beef sausage, for instance, chef, do you know the percentages?
Yes, beef is actually one of the lowest.
Yeah.
So beef, you're looking at about, it needs to contain about 50%. So depending on who makes it, but beef usually about 50%.
So let's pause. That means 50% of the sausage needs to contain beef in order for me to call it a beef sausage. What is the other 50%? Now, technically, when we look at, when we did our fast, when we spoke about our fast in the Charcuterie lesson, we spoke about a fast consists of three things: the main item, beef, a fat, and then a binding agent. So they work it out that the binding agent and the fat should contain the rest of the elements. Lamb, I believe, is 70% something, and pork is 60% something. All right, so that means that technically for a beef sausage, 50% can be something else. Have you ever gone to the butchery, for instance, and you buy sausage that says beef sausage, and it's quite pale in color? It's because they probably filled it up with pork. They can only if they say 100% beef, then you know it's 100% beef. The casing itself might not be from, it isn't from beef. It is from pork, or the thinner casing is lamb. So when you do go buy sausages, you need to read the packaging. That's why like about 8 years ago, there was big drama about sausage making and horse meat and donkey meat in sausages. And it comes from the fact that by law, we are only legislated for that percentage of the actual animal. So chefs, that's why homemade sausages are the best. It is expensive. Casing itself is extremely expensive. You won't believe, we paid 180 Rand today for 400 grams of sausage casing. So now that we have our meat mixture ready, Chef Shanae has a sausage stuffer, and casings are cured. So it's actually preserved in salt. So you would need to soak it in water to bring out or to reconstitute it. So what you need to then do is, once you've found the head of your casing, I just want to make sure you can see, you then, this is a very thin casing, so I'm a bit worried about it, I won't lie. Oh, I lost it. I found it. What you then do is you need to find the opening of the intestine. What is easier then, chef, you can start stuffing your cavity. So I've now found the opening, and what I'm doing is just feeding a little bit of water into the casing. Now the water isn't going to go into the sausage, it will pass through, but what it does do, just so that you can see, it kind of lubricates the casing, which makes it easier for the stuffing to go in. Now I am going to start talking about that because every year there is quite a murmur with regards to the boys in the class when I say it. So what now needs to happen is Chef Shanae needs to stuff our stuffer. I'm just going to leave our opening here so we know where it is. These casings are extremely long actually, so you'll be surprised to see how much you get out of it. So although 400 grams doesn't sound like a lot, you're going to make a hell of a lot of sausage with it. So into the stuffer, you want to make sure that there are no air pockets. Again, just so then you have a sustainable or a nicely filled sausage. And then we're going to put our little forcer in. I don't know what you call it. And once
The vacuum. Okay, let's go with
once
that.
Chef Shanae has then stabilized her machine, we are going to be, I just want to make sure where we are, that's good. We are then going to start feeding the casing onto the tube. Now, the easiest way to do that without tearing the casing, because the tube is, it's quite hard, is you want to just put the lid on, and then Chef Shanae is going to feed a little bit of the sausage meat through, and then we're going to thread it. So you'll see there's a bit of air, that's fine. Just, oops. Right, so now there's a little bit of the sausage itself helping, so now you can just pull the casing over the nozzle. And you want to, the longer the casing, the longer the individual sausage is. It's easier if you have it in the water. It just makes it easier to handle. A little bit of water on the counter isn't a problem because we can just clean that up just now. So our nozzle is full, so what I'm just going to do, and the casings are really tough, so you just want to cut it up. Just give me a cut there. Thank you. So it's safe. Keep the end there. So I'm not going to tie it, but you could if you want to. I'm just now going to hold. Right, so as you can see, our sausage is filling in slow motion. And I'm just making sure that the casing doesn't dry, because as soon as it dries, it then breaks. Beautiful. Lamb sausage is traditionally a thinner sausage because it is fully from the lamb casing itself. So then this is 100% lamb, and it's not a synthetic casing. Thanks, Chef, to start with. Okay, and there we have a beautiful sausage. So chefs, if you want to take the sausage and you want to make, for instance, bangers, what they would do is you would kind of fill it a little bit looser than what you would with the real, like the round sausage, if I can say, and then you pinch and squeeze. Decide what size you want your sausage to be, pinch it out, and then turn, okay? Same size, pinch it out, turn, and then when you get here, you would twist the two together. Again, pinch down, so you squeeze it down and twist. Come on, broke now. Just want to squeeze it down and twist, and then what you have is what you see on television when they hang the sausages. There you have your little bangers. Perfect. Next up, we are going to show you how to do a little bit of hot smoke cowboy, if I can say. Now, there's the right way a clever way and then your way to do something. So we want to show you how you can smoke something in your kitchen if you don't have a smoker. Now, traditionally you would have a smoker, which is a container that has like a little chamber, a trivet that you put your smoking chips in, and then you would smoke it either on the stovetop, or you get electric smokers these days as well. But if you don't have any of that, but you really want a quick smoke, what we could do is smoke with tea. So what Chef Shanae has is a container, and we've lined it with tin foil. Now the reason why we've lined it with tin foil, chefs, is just because we don't like cleaning up. So because it might burn, you can just lift the foil out and throw it away.
And so, not to damage your mother's pots.
True story. So what are we going to smoke today, chef, and what are you going to smoke it with?
So we have chicken breast that we're going to smoke today. So we're going to do smoked chicken breast. We have a bit of rooibos to give it a bit of flavor. We have rice, we have water, and then we have salt.
Right. So what's going to happen is, first we need to create the smoking agent. So generally you smoke with wood. Wood chips, however, in a kitchen, if you want a quick smoke, takes too long, or takes a long time to activate. So what we would smoke with is tea. Tea is essentially dried leaves. We're going to smoke with rooibos because the flavor of the rooibos itself is going to give you an elevated component in your chicken. So because we don't have wood chips, what could we use, chef?
Rice.
So dried rice, couscous doesn't work, I've tried that. But dried rice in the base of the pan, so that's going to be your smoking chips. And you want to put quite a lot in there just to make sure that it's not going to burn necessarily. Then we're going to put in our flavoring element. That's enough, chef. That's 2 bags of rooibos tea, and that's going to go over the rice. Then, just to create a quick smoke, we're going to add a few pinches of sugar. The sugar is going to burn, and it's just going to give you a quick smoke. And then, because we don't want it to burn instantly, we will put in a little bit of moisture, so water. A little bit of water over the rice and the tea, and there we have our smoking element. Then the reason why we use such an odd, if I can say, tray is because we have a trivet that fits a trivet, so it lifts up over the smoking element, and then we're going to put whatever it is that we are going to smoke. So you could, if you want to, season it before the time, but I'd suggest that you season afterwards. The only reason why is because smoking is quite strong, and you can then test the seasoning after rather. Then, if you have a lid, put the lid on. Otherwise, what do you do, chef?
So we're just going to use a bit of foil. So foil is going to keep that smoke in. So we're just going to cover it with a bit of foil.
You want to make sure there's a little bit of space for the foil to move. So you see there's the first part, and then we're going to lift it up a little bit so that the smoke has a bit of space to, if I can say, travel within our sealed area. You need to make sure that it's fully sealed around the edges, because you don't want the smoke to escape. You want it to sit around. So now that we have that, just kind of scrunch it up, Chip. I find it sometimes it's easier. There you go. We're just going to create a little smoking chimney. So you're just going to take a knife and create a hole somewhere, maybe because it's long on 2 sides, and that way the smoke can escape a little bit. You don't want the chicken to taste like it just kissed a smoker. Straight onto the heat, so if you have gas, straight on the gas, or we're going to put it on a high heat, and then you're going to smoke it. If you have it so close to what you're smoking, you're going to smoke it for about 5 minutes tops. All right, so as you see, the smoke starts on the Snappy Chef, it's instant, but on the gas it might take a little bit longer. So we're just going to let that smoke on a medium heat now for about 5 minutes, and then taste it. It might not cook the chicken. So what would we do then, Chef?
You can then cook it further in the oven or put it back onto smoke.
Perfect. Right, so while we are waiting for our chicken to smoke, we are going to make one of the most classic British dishes, which is a English pot pie. So a pot pie is basically, it's pork meat. So I have minced meat as well as pork shoulder, and we are going to make it in a pastry. So on croûte, we are making a hot water pastry. So a pastry that we are going to boil on the stove. I'm just going to get started, and then I'll see you just now. We're going to be making our hot water pastry, and this is one of my favorite pastries to make, only because it's not as scientific as puff pastry or short pastry. So it's hot water pastry. So guess what is the main ingredient? Hot water, and in that we have butter, and we're going to add salt. So the butter melts into the water itself, and we're going to make a paste like the start of choux pastry. So this is bread flour. It's not pastry flour, or cake flour. So the reason we use a stronger flour is we want the pastry to hold the actual meat. And you can imagine, if you remember from our beef Wellington, the puff pastry was quite delicate and it soaked up a lot of the liquid and it went soggy. With hot water pastry, it's beautiful because it seals the outside, makes it really nice and crispy, but it doesn't absorb the liquids itself. So into our hot water, we are now going to add flour. Sorry, Chef, this is awkward. And stir it in. I'm just turning the heat down, and I turn the heat down on our smoke as well because we really don't want it to over smoke. So all I'm doing now, sorry, I know you can't see, is adding the flour, and then Chef, you can just give it a generous beat until it comes together. Once it comes together, you can then turn off the heat and just continue stirring. So we don't want to cook it, but it's going to come together into a paste. I think we need a bit more flour there.
No.
And while Chef Shanae does the hard work, I'm going to get started on our filling. So this is just the pot we're going to make it pot pie. I did line the pot with a little bit of baking paper or tin foil, just to make sure that when we turn it out, it's a bit easier. So into this mix, how's that looking? Good, a little bit more flour. And then you can turn it out onto the counter and start working it in the counter. So pork meat, this is mince that has it's lean mince, so it's not too much fat. And there we have diced pork shoulder. I like the combination of the fine meat and the chunkier meat because it's going to give you textural elements and it's going to make it a little bit more fun to eat. And into this, I just have some fresh chopped oregano. You can use other herbs, but traditionally a pot pie is plain and simple. Then Chef, just hand me the salt and the pepper. A little bit of seasoning goes a long way, and traditionally a pot pie is a one-bite meal. So you get the whole meal in one, if I can say go. So what they have is they would traditionally put a soft-boiled egg in the center of a pot pie so that when you slice through it, Chef, you can just let it cool down a wee bit, maybe turn up your smoke a little bit, and then we can let that rest. So all I'm doing now, I'm just mixing my ingredients in. Don't overwork the mince. If you overwork it, it becomes finer, almost emulsified. So we just want to make sure that our herbs and our shoulder has...
Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes.
I was going with hand in hand, shoulders. What isn't there something like that? Anyway, so I'm just making sure it's all mixed in so that it's ready once our pastry is ready. So we're just going to let the pastry cool down ever so slightly, and then I'm going to show you how to line the mold. So our pastry has cooled down. It's still quite warm, and this is the beautiful thing about this pastry is you can work with it either hot or cold. So you don't really have to wait for it to cool down fully before you start working with it. And another positive is because it has the fat and the water, you'll see that it doesn't stick to the counter. So you don't want to overwork it because we don't want it to be tough, but we just want to bring it together. Our chicken has finished smoking, and so it sat for about 5 minutes. What we're going to do, off heat, we are going to let it sit for another 5 minutes before we then open and take it out. So what I'm going to do in the interim is I'm going to start with the lining of my pan. So I always forget, so therefore please remember, take a bit of your pastry, set it aside for the lid of your pie. I have an egg ready for egg wash. Chef, if you can just grab a brush for us. And what we're going to do is we're just going to line our pan. And you'll feel that this pastry should have the same consistency as Play-Doh that you used to have as a kid. Right, so I've just kind of rolled it to about a 0.5 millimeter, and what you could do is then if you want to be fancy, you roll the dough onto your tray, onto your pin, and then you are going to remember that it rolls off when you don't lift the actual thing. Then you would just kind of very easily, or gently rather, ease the pastry in like that. And then you would, if you had the patience, you would then lower it in and press it down. If you don't have the patience, right, I'm going to just show you because both are possible. I don't have the patience. Is this pastry is really that great because you can just patch and go. So as long as you patch and go, you can actually just put the pastry in and squeeze. And then you just make sure when you squeeze, the difference is that obviously rolling it out gives you the same thickness. You just need to make sure that you get the same thickness as you squeeze. The most important part, chefs, is that there is no hole or gap in the base of the pan, because if there is a gap, it is going to, the moisture is going to soak through and it's going to then stick to the pan and you're not going to be able to turn your pie out. So what I'm doing is I'm just quickly just motoring around and kind of overlapping the edge of the tray, of the pot itself. The reason why is just we want to make sure when we create our lid later that there is still pastry for it to stick onto. Right, once we've done this, Chef Shanae, don't you want to just bring me my filling? Smells nice and rooibos-y over here. For those of you who haven't been able to smoke, this is a good way to smell smoke. I don't know if that's your thing. No?
No.
There. Making sure that the edges are nice and even. And there we have our pastry pot. In goes our mixture, and this is raw, remember? Again? Yeah. This is raw, so I'm just kind of going to start. And because my pot is quite big, I'm going to add 2 boiled eggs in the center, but otherwise, if it's a smallish pot, you would just add 1. So what we do, just make sure, and it's soft boiled egg so that it also doesn't get that sulfur ring at the end when when you open it up. So in goes my eggs, and then gently around the eggs because otherwise we squash them and we don't want that. But over here, you'll see the egg peeping out. What I just want to do, I take my finger and I just kind of tuck it in because we want to eliminate any air pockets. So just around the egg to make sure there are no air pockets, and then I'm going to add the final bit of mix. So there we have a pot full of potential pie. Now we know why they do that in the movies. Right, so what I've now done is Chef Shanae did, we've rolled our pastry and we've made it a little bit thicker than the lining. The reason why is the lid is going to have a lot of pressure against it because the steam's going to build up. So I'm just kind of cutting it a little bit thicker. We're going to brush the edges, and then Chef Shanae, if you can just grab the chimney we made.
Sure.
And talk them through what a chimney is. So chefs,
this is a chimney, and what I did, number one, how to make it was I took a bit of foil and I kind of just rolled it together, and you want to see that you want to create a chimney that the liquid can flow through. So why we use a chimney is when you cook meat, for instance, there has to be an escape for those juices to come through. So what happens is if you don't have a place of where the juices can come through, it kind of bursts through the edges and then you get all the juice that kind of seeps out. So what we want to do is have the juice come up through our chimney and back down into our meat.
Yeah. So what I'm doing now is you'll see that I have now put my lid on, and I am just kind of squeezing the bottom, which is the side, and the lid side together. And that just means that we seal it perfectly so that the steam only goes out where we intend it to go out. And I'm squeezing it around and nice and flat, because if you want to be all creative, then you can be. If you were my mother, she would be cutting out initials of every person who will be eating this pie and putting it on. But what I'll just do is, now that I have a bit of pastry to play with, I'm just going to do a basic pinch. So you can do the crimp and pinch. So you just kind of bring it in and you just kind of pinch it in like that. Or you can do the crimp and fold, that you just kind of bring it in like that. You kind of
Chef,
tuck
you
it
can
in like
also,
that.
oh sorry Chef,
No,
you can also
no.
do something called lattice work. Chef, do you want to tell them what lattice work is?
I haven't sworn her on camera. So no, I don't want to tell them. You can tell them.
So chef's lattice work is, you take like leftover pastry and then you can create different shapes. You can do weaving with it. So any type of creative, if I can say, work using the extra pastry that goes on top of your pot pie.
So because Sheena said that, and I'll tell you the lattice work story later on another day, I'm just kind of going to create a plain base. You can take a fork or a crimper. Actually, can I just have a teaspoon there?
Sure.
So what we'll do, we'll just kind of be lazy. And this goes into the oven. It's also not a hot oven, 160 degrees. The reason why is we want our pastry to bake and be golden brown, but there is raw meat inside, so it has to cook. So you would have a thermometer that you can just core temperature it, but remember there's a boiled egg, so just kind of core temperature the sides. If you wanted to, chefs, at this stage, you can create a little bit of artwork. Okay, I'll see if I feel that way off camera, or like we did with our Wellington, you could just kind of carve something. But right here in the center, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a hole for our chimney. That goes in there. We're going to then take our egg wash. You can egg wash the whole thing, but I might just decorate it a little bit, but just egg wash around the chimney. Little bit of pastry and seal it off, and that should then, yeah, forgive me using the tweezers, that should then have our liquids as it comes up, and as the steam, it boils up and down in the chimney, which means it's not going to force its way out of the actual pie. So this goes into the oven for about 45 minutes. You need to check it every now and then to make sure that it's cooked. You need to make sure it's cooked through. What then happens, if you remember with our Wellington, the meat shrunk, but what happens is the meat will shrink here as well. But we're going to take some of our aspic, melt it down and pour it down the chimney, and then hopefully the aspic is going to sit all around those crevices, which then keeps our pastry and our meat all combined. Welcome back, chef. So I thought we'd show you a little bit of progress we've made, and then we're going to finish off the last item on our menu today. So our terrine has just come out of the oven, and as I press down, you should be able to see quite a lot of liquid that is pressing up. So what I'm going to do in a drip tray, again, we're going to weigh it down, and you don't want to press it down like I'm doing. I just want to show you the necessity of the drip tray. So this is going to go into the fridge, which we would then leave to set overnight, preferably, or for 3 to 4 hours with a lot of weight. I might actually put another brick on just to make sure that the weight is evenly distributed. Our sausage is cooking beautifully, and I just want to show you it's not ready by a long shot, but this is our brawn that has started to set, and just have a look at that. That is our aspic that is busy doing its job. Okay, so this is going to go back into the fridge for at least another hour or two, and then it should also be ready to go. Over here we have our chicken. The chicken has smoked, and you'll see it's got a beautiful brown color to it. And all I'm going to do, don't know if you can see there, is just slice it. I tasted it earlier. Give it really nice, thin slices, and then you have that beautiful brown chicken smoke with the white flesh. Make sure it's cooked, so if it isn't cooked, you might just want to cook it a little bit longer later, but it smells amazing. And remember, we didn't season it, so you could season it afterwards. Oh, beautiful. It smells amazing. The last item that we'll be showing you in this part of our demonstration is a classic scotched egg. Now, a scotched egg is, I can only imagine that there was a mom somewhere that only had meat and only had eggs and didn't know what to do anymore, and she decided, well, let's just do a quick, handy little lunch. And a scotched egg was born. So scotched egg traditionally with sausage meat or beef. So this is beef mince that it's lean mince, so it doesn't have too much fat. And into my beef mince, I'm just going to put a little bit of dried oregano. You can put whatever herbs you want. You can flavor it the way you want. If you wanted to make an oriental scotched egg with prawn meat and a quail's egg as a little canapé, very good idea. And then I'm going to just add a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. Right. The center of our scotched egg is, of course, an egg. So I have a soft-boiled egg with me, and then we are going to crumb it, flour, egg, and breadcrumb. So pané anglaise, if you wanted to know. So a scotched egg, one scotched egg takes about 80 grams of beef mince. So we will be making 2 today. I might just show you one and then make one offside. But it's pretty much a handful of mince equals the amount that you need for your scotched egg. Once you've flavored it and seasoned it, and guys, it really is important, I believe, for fresh mince. Frozen mince just doesn't bind the way that it does fresh. So if you had frozen mince, you would have to add a binder like an egg yolk, which is not ideal. So you make a flat patty, if I can say, and then you are going to, once you've kind of flattened it out, you are then going to wrap the egg around it. So, what I like about beef is the fact that beef can be eaten medium rare if you want to. Because the problem with the scotched egg is, the problem with the scotched egg is that you don't know if the meat is cooked until you've cut into it. So I always, if I had to do it for many people, I would start it in the fryer, get it nice and golden brown, and finish it off in the oven so that I make sure that the meat is cooked. But because this is beef, if it is like medium rare, I can be forgiven for it. So the idea is that it is a really soft boiled egg so that it doesn't overcook while you are frying it. So there we have our little meat egg. And let's just get this out of the way. Now I'm going to start with a little bit of seasoned flour, just salt and pepper. Again, if you want to go spicy, for instance, you can. But it's up to you. Make sure you dab the flour everywhere. And then into the egg mixture. And the advice I'm always given is 1 hand for the egg and 1 hand for the dry ingredients. So this then goes into the breadcrumbs. You can season your breadcrumbs, maybe a little bit of Parmesan powder would really be nice. And because my breadcrumb is so fine, I am going to crumb it again. I'm going to do a double crumb. Okay, and there's a little crack there. So all I'm going to do is just pinch to make sure that the crack is closed, because we don't want the oil to seep in. So again, it just goes in there. But because there is already the breadcrumb, the flour shouldn't need to be as active. And then a good bath of egg. And while I'm doing this, I have a pot of oil that is preheating. Oh, I dipped my wet hand. Silly me. And then this will be dropped into the oil. Just make sure it's nicely covered. I'm just going to wash my hands quickly before we drop it in the oil. Right, so chefs, I have my scotched eggs ready and crumbed. I have medium oil, and I'm just going to dip it in, and I really don't want the oil to be too hot, because if it's too hot, it's going to brown the egg before it actually cooks the meat. So I'm just spooning a little bit of the oil over. If you had it in the deep fryer, then obviously it would be cooking on both sides, but you just want to make sure that it cooks all over. So you just turn it over and spoon the oil in. So you'll hear, or you won't hear, and that's the point, that the heat is not too heavy. So as we are waiting for our little scotched egg to cook, we have cut some of our chicken already, and we've cooked our sausage, and you'll see that that is going to be our little smorgasbord for the day. And then for our next practical, we are going to finish up. We're going to make a galantine, and then we are going to be showing you all the finishing off with our terrines and our molds and our gravlax. Our scotched egg is cooked, and what I just want to do is grab the salt that I lost. There it is. And you just want to make sure that you season the outside generously. And this is then the moment of truth. We will only know if it's okay once we cut through it. So good luck, chef. A pastry knife is easier, just because then your crust doesn't break. Right, and there we have it, chefs. Our scotched egg with our medium egg, and our beef isn't fully cooked, but I'm okay with that as a medium egg. And there we have, I'm just going to do that. How are you doing, chef?
I'm almost done here, chef.
And there we have it, chefs, our first part of our charcuterie lesson. We have smoked chicken, we have lamb sausage, we have beef scotched egg, gravlax is busy graveling, our terrines are busy setting, our pot pie is still in the oven, our confit is going to be beautiful, and what you probably won't see is once the confit comes out, we're just going to pick it off the bone while it's still warm and stir in some of that duck fat and make a paste with it, or a pate that you can spread on your bread. Next time you see us, we will then continue with our galantine, and Chef Shanae is going to show you all the aspicy things that she spoke about in the lesson. Thanks, Chef.
Thank you.